Alright, so we got the one side of the rear portion of the transmission tunnel. I got it all tacked in. Basically, I'm doing it in two pieces. The metal I have is only a foot wide, so I don't have enough to go all the way around, which is fine. It shouldn't really affect it too much. But I just made this piece, kind of hand formed it over the pole in the garage. And just put it in place, held it with some pliers, and then just started a tack up at the top, and then just went around using a screwdriver tip to like hold pressure and just continue to work all the way around it. Let me show you the other side. And this is what I was talking about before. You can see here the way how much of the tunnel, how high the tunnel is there, because the top of the transmission here, when I take the transmission out, it has to slide not quite this far back, but pretty far. So so that should work. Again, I'm just going to have to figure out what I'm going to do as far as a shifter. Once the shifter is in, it'll probably be like the body of the shifter will probably be somewhere up here, so it shouldn't be too far off. So we got the tunnel all done. Everything's tack welded in. The front portion is pretty much welded. The rear here is tacked. I'm probably just going to go around and tack, do a lot more tacks, but probably not going to fully weld this since it does overlap. I'll just seam seal that up. So finish welding this, and then we'll figure out the location of our shifter. Given where this was, it's probably like right here in this area. So we'll have to cut a hole in that and figure out what we're going to do as far as boot and that type of thing. So, but that's it. Transmission tunnel is finally done. This was something I was not looking very forward to doing, but it came out okay considering. Tools help a lot. So if you're gonna get into doing more than just a simple sheet metal, I would suggest getting more tools. Just really helps the process a lot. But it came out okay, and once we do a console and carpet, you'll never even know. As you can see, it looks kind of Frankenstein the way it's all welded up, but I don't know, I was having some issues trying to get everything bent right and make the contours right, so it seemed a little easier just to maybe do it in pieces, and it came out actually pretty good. It doesn't look great, but once I get it all cleaned up and finished, should look alright. I have a hole there for the shifter. I am waiting on a piece to come. I ordered a lower shift boot out of a Mustang, and I'm going to try to make that work so that there is a seal between the body and the transmission to keep noise, debris, heat, anything like that from coming up around the shifter. And then I eventually plan on putting some type of console or something in here, so there will be another shifter boot, which is more cosmetic more than anything, for the shifter. So get a better look. It was tough with all the junk in the way, getting up in there and welding that. I actually welded the front piece from the bottom, and the top, or the back, two back pieces from the top, because I had the transmission in. I originally had figured on taking the transmission out and welding it from the bottom, but I don't know, it just seemed easier to keep the right amount of clearance and everything once I got the transmission in there. The previous video, you could see pretty good how the transmission kind of runs with the transmission tunnel. So that worked out pretty good. But I'm kind of on a standstill with the tunnel until we get that piece for the center. I also ordered a MGW shifter for the car. I was looking at a couple different shifters, and that one seemed to be pretty nice. I want something that has a pretty tight feel to it. That shifter seemed like it had good centering springs and everything in it, so I'm going to give that a try. The other thing I liked about it is, if you're not familiar with those shifters, instead of having like your typical bolt-on shifter handle, they use a stub on the shifter, and it has a little block that locates the shifter handle off to the side. Being where this transmission locates the shifter, it is a little towards the center, so that block is going to help move it over probably about 1.5 inches, something like that. I will have to make some modifications to the shifter handle because it is designed for like a larger 16mm shift handle with a larger ball that comes in, the newer generation cars. I don't like that bigger ball. I like what they call like the classic shifter ball. I like the looks of it being a little bit smaller. I think the difference in the size is like a 1 7/8 compared to like a 2 1/4 or 2 3/8, something like that. So yeah, so waiting on that stuff. I started to mess with the pedals a little bit. I have to get a bolt made or do something. I ordered a bolt and shim kit for like a stock 4-speed pedal setup, and the bolt that came with it, the pedals are super loose. They just jiggle around, so I got to figure something out for that. The other thing that we've been up to, I took the wastegate off the car. The wastegate was here. Took the exhaust pipe off because there is, I don't know if you can see it here, this wire went to the wastegate before, and when I was racing the car, we had it set up so that the boost controller ran off of spring pressure and CO2 pressure, and that little wire went to a sensor that monitored CO2 pressure going to the wastegate. Since I'm going to be driving the car and not really racing anymore, I don't need that kind of progressive control with a boost controller. So I'm going to get just a set of springs that work in the wastegates. So whatever the spring pressure is, that's what it's just going to run at all the time. I was looking at a set of springs that are about right around 12 pounds. So the car will run about 12 pounds of boost on the street, which is good for just running 93 octane pump gas in it. So the other thing we got to get into is taking the master cylinder out, taking this plate out. This wire kind of runs down into that hole. So what I have to do is take that wire, push it back through there. I'm not going to cut it in case I want to, reuse that in the future. But that is where the shifter linkage comes through. So I have all the parts to adapt that to a hydraulic shift or hydraulic clutch linkage, and in order to do that, the master cylinder has to come off, and there is a plate that bolts behind the master cylinder and basically creates the mounting point for the hydraulic clutch master cylinder. So that is going to be a little tricky. Because this is not a super stock application, we have a big old bar that's now down in the way, and just with everything else being in the way, header, steering, it's going to make that a little difficult. I was thinking I might have to take the fender off to get to it, but I don't know. I think that taking the fender off isn't really going to make a whole lot more room for me to work, so I may just leave that on, take the master cylinder off, and hopefully I can get to it that way. I think with the exhaust out of the way, it's hard to tell, but there is a little bit of a gap down there where I can kind of get up underneath of that and hopefully be able to get that all set up and welded in there. I think if I do enough prep on the part, it should go in pretty well once it's up in there. So let me show you the wastegate. Okay, so here's the wastegate off the car. Like I said, I've talked about before about how the wastegate works off of boost pressure and off of CO2 spring pressure and CO2 pressure. And the way that works is this comes off, and you can see there's this diaphragm inside the wastegate. All these little grooves in here are designed to hold springs. So like this spring that I have here is about a 5-pound spring. As you want to increase boost pressure with springs, you use this spring plus another bigger spring plus another bigger spring. Basically, you can put 3 springs in here, and depending on which, actually the springs come colored, so each colored spring has a different weight. So you can put one spring in that's one weight, put another spring in that goes like into the second groove, and then another spring that goes into the third groove, and you can keep increasing the boost pressure. If you want to use a controller like I have, you put that spring in, we'll just say the spring's in there, and then while the spring's in there, you have this, which is the pressure sensor, which would monitor the CO2 pressure that's on top of the wastegate. So the way that works is you have basically a top side and a bottom side to the diaphragm, and that the wastegate, or the solenoids that the CO2 runs through control this pressure on the top side and bottom side of it. So essentially this is where the pressure would come in. You want more pressure, you put more CO2 here, that spring's pushing down, now you have the spring pushing down, and when you fill up this area in here with CO2 pressure, this diaphragm seals this, and that will help this will want to come up to relieve boost pressure. So the more CO2 you put to it, it'll help hold this down and make more boost. So that's how that works. As I said, we are going to be eliminating this and just going with straight spring pressure. This is a maroon spring color, which I think is, like I said, around 5 pounds. According to the scale that they have, this maroon, and I need a gray one, which will give me roughly about 11 to 12 pounds. So we'll start there, see how it works. As I said, we'll be running it on just regular pump gas, so we can't get too crazy with the boost. But that's what we've been up to, and hopefully next video I'll have a little more footage of actually what we're doing on the car, and try, well, I guess it depends when the parts come in, but we'll try to have some footage of putting the rest of the shifter seals in for around the on the transmission floor, and possibly start working on that firewall and getting that bracket mounted up for the hydraulic master cylinder for the clutch pedal. Okay, well that's going to about do it for tonight. If you can, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We would really appreciate it. If you have any questions about anything, please comment. If there's anything you'd like to see on the channel, maybe questions about this build or anything else that we've posted, or maybe something that you'd like to see in the future, please let us know as well. Make sure you hit that little bell to get upcoming notifications of new videos. And that's about it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.